Hello, climbers, and welcome to Season 3 of Climbing Mount CMMC.
Well, hello, climbers, and today we're going to talk about agreements, and more specifically about how agreements are important when it comes to your CMMC journey. I know it's not the most sexiest topic to talk about, and it's sort of the thing that kind of sits in the back, but it can really save your bacon if things sort of go south or start to unwind. Everybody's happy and everything goes great if everything is great, but if things aren't always great, which we know sometimes they aren't, your agreement can be what keeps the relationship sound and safe in moving forward. Because in these types of relationships, when you're dealing with CMM compliance, is very difficult. There's a lot of risk involved. It's super complicated. There's multiple parties involved, and things could go sideways if not careful. And so having a well-written agreement is super critical to the success and well-being of your business and the business relationships with your clients. So let's get into it. Kaleigh, what do you say?
I love it. Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. It's like, I like to say, it's all good till it isn't. It's all okay till it's
Right.
not, you know?
Right.
Like, this is what we have to prepare for, and it's very important. I do feel like the people that are really going to get a lot out of this episode are business owners or leadership of a team that's going through this. This is really critical and can save you a lot of hassle in the future or very, sketchy waters in the future. So let's get into this by talking about the scoping guide, right?
Okay.
The CMMC scoping guide, where it talks about external service providers considerations, okay? The reason that Bobby brought this to our attention, I think it is so critical, is because, and I'm going to have it up on the screen here, there is a tab under this section that says that we should be considering the agreements in place with the ESP and the OSA, the Organization Seeking Assessment, such as service level agreements, right? Or even it says afterwards, it says that support the OSA's information security objectives. So these are like things that that have to do with the objectives that are at hand in the assessment. But I mean, if you are an ESP or like you're us in an MSP that is going into the CMMC space and is going to be helping clients through this, you're going to be in this a lot. You're going to be seeing this overlap a lot. This isn't just like a one-time thing or like, oh, only a few of my clients will have this happen. You will have your hands in a lot of this. I mean, service level agreements, SLAs, hello, that's a big thing for MSPs.
Yeah.
Now, what you I'm sure have more to say about this and the specifics behind this, because you are the owner. You're the owner of an MSP yourself, and have to write a lot of this and have to consider a lot of this. So speak to this from your perspective as well.
Let's just put the hat on of the Department of Defense. Let's try to pretend that we're the government, right? The government is thinking to themselves, we're giving you our data. You, the client, the OSC, we're gonna pass our potentially very sensitive data. It could be blueprints to a fighter jet, a drone system, who knows what it might be, and they're passing that data to you, and then you turn around and bring in an MSP to support you, and now that organization has pretty much unfettered access to your whole environment and the data that you may consume and have, and in that situation, that MSP now is on the hook for completing a chunk of their security requirements. And so it makes sense that the DoD is going to say, you know what, for this C3PO that's going to be assessing that organization, if they're dealing with an MSP that is so integrated with this company, we need to make sure that they're not just pinky promising that they're providing this service. There needs to be a legal contractual requirement for that MSP to provide what they say they're providing, not a sales slick, not just a little checkbox on the matrix that says partial, full, or no. Like, that doesn't cut it. Like, they want to see in the bones, like, that they are required and what that requirement looks like.
Yeah. So just to clarify, is an OSA, an organization seeking assessment, going to have an agreement prepared to give the person that is going to be their MSP that has stuff like service level agreements on it, or is this something that the ESP needs to have prepared? Because I'm reading this and I'm like, oh, it's kind of weird because, it's like the agreement's in place with the ESP. It doesn't say like from the ESP. Do you know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
I'm just curious if you ever had a situation where the opposite was at hand. But
I've had situations where the companies that we're going to engage with, they're like, here are the things that we want to make sure that we see in the agreement because we want to make sure we're protected by the fact that you're going to be providing these requirements. And I'm like, thank God that you understand that. That's a level of maturity. This company's like, they get it. Yeah. They understand that if they're going to be passing this off, they're not sticking their heads in the sand saying, well, that's their responsibility. It's not mine. Oh, well, like you say that until you're meeting the auditor and then you find out, well, maybe I should have thought to ask a few more questions because this audit is not going great. So you don't want that situation to happen. Yeah. Or even worse, they have an incident and then you find out that it's kind of like that insurance agency or company that you're like, now I go to make a claim and you go to find out they're not there to catch you. But they've been taking your check for years. Yeah. That's not a good day either.
Right. So let's talk about the guarantees. That's a little bit of a scary word, but that's what agreements do involve, is the things that you do, attest to doing or agree to do, and then the things that you don't, are not in there. So let's talk about what things that you can guarantee as an MSP or an ESP that will help you, and then what things you really should not agree to have, right?
Yeah.
So I think one thing, let's talk about a certification promise. Can you really promise a certification on an agreement? No.
Yeah, I mean, when clients are reaching out to us, we just had such an inundation. I mean, Kaleigh, you've been in tons of these calls as, the marketing director / sales director. Mm-hmm. You're in lots and lots of these calls where we're talking with clients and they're wanting some types of insurances that as we move them through their journey, that we're going to get them to a level 2 compliant environment, right? They want to know that we're going to take them in the places that they need to be so that they can be compliant. But have you ever heard me guarantee that we can get them level 2 certified?
You actually guarantee like the opposite. You say, I'm going to promise that we're going to do everything in our power that we can, but this is made so that it's not really all in our court and it's also in yours. So you basically promise like there is no such thing as a pinky promise from the MSP, because so much also does have to do with the client themselves.
Yep, absolutely. You nailed it, because these organizations, we might do 60 to 70% of their requirements. That's still 30%. That's a lot of things that they have to do. And they absolutely have a lot of control on their destiny of whether they succeed or fail in their audit. It's not so much a failure. It's just the more people you have, the more seam connections. They're sort of like, not seam like audit logs, but seams like in joints and connections, because you have the more organizations that are involved, the more of those types of connections, and the bigger the gaps could potentially exist between those two parties, and the greater chance of failure you start to have. And so in those situations, it's really important for those parties to be very honest and open about what they're doing, what they're not doing, and be realistic about what they can and can't do, and just understand that no one can really guarantee success in this manner. It's just CMMC doesn't have, I think really the way it's written, it's so difficult in the audit because there isn't a lot of grace provided for you. There's a lot of chance for just the human factor to kick in and have a failure. You could have a great designed system and the humanity, just kind of kicks in and kicks you right in the chimichangas, and there's not really a whole lot you can do about that.
Yeah. So what about something that you could guarantee, as far as maybe even going to say your controls or even your CRM? Is there something listed in an agreement that would be like we will promise to do what is listed of us in our CRM. Do you know what I'm saying? Is there verbiage like that, or do you steer clear of that kind of thing as well?
Yeah, there are certain things that I think you should be able to guarantee.
Yeah.
Like what you're bringing to the table. All U.S. based citizens.
Right.
Our team is certified in these areas. We're going to provide you these documents. There are materialistic and other types of things that I think you should absolutely put on the guarantee, and I think you need to be transparent about that. So I think that's a critical part. But you just, because there's so much risk in there, you have to also be mindful of that as you're going through.
So let's talk about too, what happens if someone fails an assessment?
Right.
What is going to happen when so let's say you don't have the guarantee, right? In your agreement, you don't have the guarantee
you
that
shouldn't have it.
Yeah, well, let's say you shouldn't have it. So you don't have it as that you will that they will get their level 2, certification, but they still fail. Is there going to be verbiage in there in the agreement that's like, they need to pay again for this? What kind of verbiage is in there for if they do fail? Which obviously we want all of our clients to pass. That is the main goal. Nobody wants somebody to fail.
Right.
This is not good. It doesn't look good for any party. So we don't want this to happen. But that doesn't mean we can't prepare for it, because you got to prepare. So what happens in this case? What verbiage do you have in your agreement for those factors?
Yeah, and in our agreement, we have in there specifically about how we would handle a situation if a client doesn't pass, as far as in who would be responsible for covering what parts of the cost that might happen, because the C3PO is going to have to go through and provide additional charges and resources to be able to do that. Who's going to cover that? And when you're dealing with a CMMC audit, so many different parties are involved. It may not be necessarily totally clear who may have been ultimately responsible for why you didn't pass.
Right.
It might have been some log entry, or information wasn't appropriately passed between the two parties. Who knows how this goes? There's 320 assessment objectives, lots and lots of resources. It is reasonable to expect there to be some type of problem. And that's where you kind of fall back on your experience. And, the system that we have built, we have lots of backstops in it to try to prevent that from happening. But we're all human. And you just can't go into this agreement with the client just trusting that, even though that's unthinkable and you don't want that to happen, let's not address that in the agreement. You really should. You need to be open with the client about that to whatever extent they're willing to talk about. But let's be honest, when you're trying to bring on a new client and you're talking with them, there's typically, when you go to bring on a client, there's just so much in just the education process of helping them try to understand what's going to be required for them to even do what they're trying to do, and then explain to what you do. And we talk to the client as much as we can about how our agreement works and those types of things, and explain it. But it's really up to the OSC to really go into the more detail of those types of things they want to. And I think understanding how their agreement refers to the matrix, the call out of what their responsibilities are in the 32 CFR integration for their agreement, as well as DFAR requirements that might be pulled in there. Those things all need to be in there, and the OSC needs to read them. They need to understand what they're signing with the MSP that they're working with.
Right. I think this goes really well into when you brought up pass-throughs and having verbiage for that as well. Because, let's say you had an assessment and maybe you pass, but you have some things that you could have done better, or maybe you fail and something needs to be reworked, or something needs to be dramatically changed. Who pays for those hours, those adjustments? Is that included in the ESP's work for the client, those kind of conversations, those are critical to have in here as well, right? Because that's going to be a conversation. I feel like either if you pass or if you fail, you could still learn something from it and want to change or adjust something. So
there's various reasons where this could happen. Let's say that you sign up for a client, you're moving through their CMMC engagement, you even got them certified. So they're super happy, high five, and they got their level 2 attestation. But let's say that the client now has contracts that require additional validations, that they want to have some additional audits, some other reports.
So true,
it could take your team days to try to help answer additional questions that these specific contracts. Maybe it's a requirement for more information for the award of the contract. Who knows what that situation might happen. But those additional times and hours for those people, does your agreement cover that? Are you supposed to, as an MSP, eat that? There's no way you could foresee that as a MSP. So I would hope you would have language in your agreement to appropriately address that so that those costs could be passed through, because I think that would be very fair to do. And there's also things that are totally out of both parties' control. The government might say, you know what, everybody, here's some additional reporting requirements that everybody's going to have to adhere to.
Policy changes, new policies incorporated in. You can't know that, but you can prepare or accommodate for changes in the future, right?
So that MSP's agreement should accommodate for those types of situations and be able to say, hey, based on these requirements, we need to get with you. These costs have to get passed through.
Right.
And so these are, we're providing these points for companies that are OSCs. Like if you go to engage with a potential MSP and they don't have really much of this verbiage in their agreement, I would be pretty concerned about their understanding of the requirements for CMMC, because you want to have those provisions in there and understand what that engagement is going to be between the two of you, knowing that if they don't even have specific references and call outs to your CRM, and they don't have even contractual agreements to comply with the CRM that they've given you, that you've executed between the two of you, you could potentially have a real problem come time to audit. So these are things that you really want to get, I think, nailed down. Not that I'm trying to, show everybody there's potential boogeymen in every closet, but there are definitely things that you should go into eyes wide open and try to make sure that both parties are protected if situations like that start to happen.
So the last thing I want to bring up is kind of like a twofold, I would say, of if you're offboarding a client as an MSP.
Now, these are so negative, aren't they? It's like, oh my God.
I know, but this could be two separate things happening. I feel there could be, whether if the MSP did not hold up for some reason their side of the bargain and the client is not happy and would like to be offboarded, or maybe there's a scenario where the MSP has seen that the client is not holding up their side of the controls and it is costing them and their, because it doesn't look good on the MSP when their client's not passing either, to offboard that client. So there's two, I feel like, separate ways that you could go at this. But, what would you need to have inside of your agreement to make that not scary waters as much in the future, I guess?
Yeah, your agreement needs to have appropriate exit strategies for both parties. It needs to have an exit strategy for the MSP. If they feel like the OSC just literally isn't listening to them and they're just bringing on more and more risk by continuing to work with them.
Right.
I would never want to engage an OSC that after I start working with them and realize they're not going to be there come time assessment to pass. I know they're going to fail because they're not even delivering what I need. And I'm being very gracious. I know when they're looking down the barrel of the audit, this is going to go sideways. And based on how management is working and how they're taking the way that we're talking, it's not going to go well when they do eventually fail. This is a really bad disastered situation. And both parties are setting themselves up for a really bad reckoning. And so the agreement needs to appropriately have verbiage so that in that situation, you can say, I want to exit. We need to separate. We need to do it in a way that's amicable for both parties. And, you go your way and I go my way. And the same way for the OSC, maybe the MSP talked a good game, and then you start to realize they're not going to bring it come time audit time, and you don't have that warm and fuzzy, especially if a majority, if not all, of your contracts are coming from DoD or other type of CMMC requirement contracts. And now that you have the FAR rule out, there's additional requirements there that are eventually going to kick in. So whatever's kind of bringing you to those requirements, you just need to make sure that you feel like you have the appropriate exit strategy if they're not pulling their weight. Because they may say, you know what, let's loop you in for 3 years, and you have no verbiage in your contract to leave that MSP if they're not doing their jobs correctly for CMMC and other things. Yeah. I would be very concerned about signing that agreement because I just don't think that's fair.
That's so scary. Yeah.
Yeah. So you really need to think about how to do those types of exit strategies. And it might be a situation where maybe the company got acquired and they have their own incumbent IT people and they want to start doing it. And they're just like, we're yanking it. We don't care what you say. Even if it's a situation where that needs to happen and you don't feel like it's amicable, but you still need to unwind it. Who's going to be responsible for paying for those unwinds? How's that going to work? You just need to have that type of verbiage in there. I know we're being sort of negative, but
no, but I feel like it's more preparation than like, yes, I get that there's negatives and positives to it, and mostly negatives, but it's the preparation just in case. None of these things should happen. We don't want any of these things to happen, but it's like, if they do, would you rather have prepared for it or not?
Right.
Yep. And I think the moral of the story is, too, by the time we've finished all of these bullet points that we've said, I've noticed that this doesn't sound like the same agreement that it once was before.
All right.
So moral of the story is a CMMC engaged, like an MSP that is engaged in the CMMC ecosystem that is walking clients through the CMMC journey should have a different looking agreement than the one that they had before as just a regular commercial MSP.
Yeah, right? At a minimum, as you see the scoping guides requiring specific call outs to address how they're on the hook for what's in the matrix. So it just right there, if you don't have that somehow integrated correctly into your agreement, you're potentially creating a potential problem for your client if you don't even have that.
Well, I hope, again, this is not, the normal, all about the positives of how cool it is to work with a MSP or C3PAO or whatnot, but these are real things. So we're going through as a company. We wanted to share with you guys because you guys are going to be going through this too, probably. And maybe you've lost sleep or lost hair over it as a business owner.
Or all the above.
Or all of the above.
But, I'd like to hear also if other people feel like there are other aspects that they would like to see or they feel like should be in those agreements that I haven't mentioned. I mean, there are more that we have. We just don't have enough time to cover a lot of those types of minutiae.
Yeah.
But I think it would still be great for people to comment when they've listened. And you may not know it, but you can actually make comments in Spotify now. I just started seeing it.
I saw that. Yeah, that's cool.
So we have there's lots of different media where you can comment. Please do. We'd like to hear what you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Thank you all for tuning in, and make sure to look out for our next episode next Thursday. But until then, guys, keep on climbing. See ya. Make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube to stay up to date on the latest CMMC news. We hope you guys enjoyed today's episode and listen out for the next one. But until then, keep on climbing.